Hello, students. Welcome to Grade 10 Science Lesson. And I'm your teacher, Ma'am Karin J. Cansado. At the end of the module, you are expected to, number 1, describe the features of tectonic movements. Number 2, determine how tectonic activities could also happen within a plate and not just along the boundaries. And number 3, appreciate the importance of being prepared for an earthquake. You have learned from our previous lesson that lithospheric plates are moving at different directions. These movements of plates can be classified into 3 types of boundaries, namely convergent plate boundary, divergent plate boundary, and transform fault plate boundary. Along the plate margins, earthquakes, volcanoes, and mountain ranges are being formed. What other geologic activities may be formed in the 3 types of plate boundaries? What will happen if 2 different lithospheric plates collide? Why do we need to study these different geologic processes? Let's find out in today's lesson. This time, you will learn the different processes and geologic features along plate boundaries that slowly shape the Earth's surface that give rise to mountain ranges, volcanoes, earthquakes, and other geologic features for you to explain the processes that occur along convergent, divergent, and transform fault plate boundaries. Let's start our lesson with this activity. You're going to match the type of fault that occurs in a specific type of plate boundary. You're going to match the column A to column B. Under column A, we have normal fault, thrust fault, and strike-slip fault. Under column B, we have transform fault boundary, convergent plate boundary, and divergent plate boundary. You're going to write your answer in your science journal. For our next activity, you're going to fill in the blanks with the missing letter to complete the word that is represented by the picture. You're going to write your answer in a given worksheet. After you have finished the 2 previous activities, let's find out how much you already know about this lesson. You're going to answer the 5-item test or pre-test to assess you of what you know about the processes that occur along plate boundaries. You are going to write your answer in the given worksheet. If you are done with the pre-test, you have this learning task number 1. You're going to read and study the different types of plate boundaries and answer the questions that follow after the discussion of the contents on plate boundaries. Here are the questions for convergent and divergent plate boundaries. Number 1. What process occurs along the divergent plate boundary? Number 2. What geologic features form when 2 plates moved away from each other? And number 3. Compare Rift Valley from Mid-Ocean Ridge. Then explain your answer. You're going to write your answer in your science journal. And here are the questions for transform fault plate boundary. Number 1. What process occurs along transform fault plate boundary? Number 2. How do plate boundaries become transform fault? And number 3. Why transform fault occurs in lithosphere? You're going to write your answer for transform fault plate boundary in your science journal.
Let's start with convergent plate boundary. The geologic processes that will be formed along this type of plate boundary depends on the material of plates that are colliding. We have the convergence of oceanic to continental plates, convergence of oceanic to oceanic plates, and lastly, convergence of continental to continental plates. Let's take a look on each type of convergent plate boundary. Oceanic continental convergent plate boundaries. This figure shows the convergence between oceanic crustal plate and continental crustal plate. As two different plates collide, the leading edge of the oceanic plate bends towards the mantle since it is denser than the continental plate. The bending of the denser plate towards the mantle is called subduction process. Since the mantle is hotter than the crust, the tendency of the subducted leading edge of the oceanic crust will be melted, forming magma. Addition of volatile materials such as water will cause the magma to become less dense. This allows the magma to rise and reach the edge of the continental crust plate, forming volcanic arc. Aside from volcanic arc, what other geologic events could be formed in convergence of oceanic continental crustal plates? The continuous grinding of plates against each other will cause the occurrence of earthquakes. One important geologic feature formed at the oceanic crust is a trench, or also known as submarine valleys. Ocean trenches are the deepest part of the ocean. Did you know? One of the deepest trench of the world is the Philippine Trench, with a depth of 10,540 meters. Oceanic convergent plate boundaries. A second type of convergent plate boundary involves the sinking of oceanic lithosphere beneath another plate of oceanic lithosphere. Converging oceanic plates will cause formation of trenches, and these trenches will become sources of earthquakes. The leading edge of the subducted plate will eventually reach the mantle, causing it to melt and turn it into magma. The molten material will rise to the surface, creating a volcanic island arc parallel to the trench. Did you know? The western half of the Pacific Ring of Fire is full of these volcanic island arcs, including Japan, Indonesia, and Philippines. Many parts of the Philippines originated from oceanic convergence. This resulted from the collision of two oceanic plates, with one of the plates diving under the other. Majority of the islands in the Philippine archipelago are considered as part of the Philippine Mobile Belt. These islands were formed 65 million years ago at the southern edge of the Philippine Sea Plate and are considered as part of island arcs. Other parts of the Philippines such as Palawan, Mindoro, and the Zamboanga Peninsula are all highland sections of the Sandalan Block of the Eurasian Plate. The Philippine Mobile Belt eventually collided with the Sandalan Block, which explains the presence of trenches such as Manila Negros Cotabato Trench System and the Sulu Trench. On the eastern side of the Philippines, trenches like the Philippine Trench and East Luzon Trough are both products of subducting Philippine Sea Plate beneath the archipelago. Aside from the formation of trenches and troughs, chains of active volcanoes that stretches from Taiwan to Mindoro were created. Some of the known volcanoes in this chain are Mount Pinatubo and Taal. Also, the constant dipping movement of slabs induces frequent moderate to strong earthquakes at various depths, gives rise to mountain ranges, and develops the geologic character of the Philippine archipelago. Continental convergent plate boundaries. When two continental plates converge, a collision zone is formed. Unlike the other two types of convergent plate boundaries, subduction ceases for this type of convergence. What does it mean when we say subduction ceases? It means that no trench, no volcano, and no island arc are created in this type of convergent plate boundary. Instead, it leads to the formation of large group of tall mountains called mountain range. Did you know? About 40 to 50 million years ago, two large land masses, India and Eurasia, collided to begin the formation of the most visible product of plate tectonics, the Himalayas. Also, collision of continental plates is associated with shallow earthquake activities. Divergent plate boundary is when the lithospheric plates are moving apart from each other. If the divergent movement is happening in the oceanic plates, it can lead to the formation of the oceanic ridge and rift valley. What are oceanic ridge and rift valley? How are they formed? The oceanic ridge occurs when convection currents rise in the mantle beneath the oceanic crust and create magma where two tectonic plates meet at a divergent boundary. As plates continue to move apart, an uplifted ocean floor will develop in both sides of the plates, which is called oceanic ridge. Since oceanic crust is thinner than the continental crust, the creation of a linear-shaped lowland between oceanic ridges will develop called rift valley. Did you know? The Mid-Atlantic Ridge is a mid-ocean ridge located along the floor of the Atlantic Ocean and part of the longest mountain range in the world. Did you know also? Rocks near the oceanic ridge are younger than those far from it. Divergent plate movement can also occur in continental plates. As continental plate starts to move apart, the crust will start thinning and develops a continental rift valley. The continental rift valley will develop into a narrow sea and then into a widened ocean. Transform fault plate boundary. Let's examine the simulation above. If the blocks represent the lithospheric plates, you will notice that there were two sets of divergent plate boundaries between blocks 1 and 2 and blocks 3 and 4. But since the plates were adjacent to each other, a new type of boundary is manifested, and that is the transform fault boundary between blocks 2 and 3. The presence of an oceanic ridge is an indication of diverging plates, and as the plates diverge between the two segments of the mid-ocean ridge, the adjacent slabs of crust are grinding past each other, forming transform fault. Transform boundaries and the resulting faults produce many earthquakes because edges of tectonic plates are jagged rather than smooth. As the plates grind past each other, the jagged edges strike each other, catch, and stick, locking the plates in place for a time. Because the plates are locked together without moving, a lot of stress builds up at the fault line. This stress is released in quick bursts when the plates suddenly slip into new positions. The sudden movement is what we feel as the shaking and trembling of an earthquake. Most transform faults are located within the ocean basins. There are few that cuts through the continental crust like the San Andreas Fault. Let's summarize what you have learned. Divergent plate boundary is when plates move apart from each other, forming mid-oceanic ridges, rift valleys, and shallow earthquakes. Transform fault plate boundary is a fault along a plate boundary where the motion is predominantly horizontal. No leading edge of plate is being destroyed. This means that no volcanoes, no mountains are formed, but rather earthquakes.
For learning task 2, you're going to study the 3 given pictures and group of words inside the box. You're going to use the words to explain the processes that occur in each picture. You're going to write your answer in your science journal. After you explain the different processes that occur in each picture, now for learning task number 3, you're going to explain the processes along plate boundaries through the use of graphic organizer. You're going to write the different processes that occur in each type of boundary in each circle. Write your answer in your science journal. If you are done with learning task number 3, let's have this next activity. In this activity, you're going to complete the given table. Choose your answer from the list of words in the box according to the motion effect, structure created, and volcanic activity. You're going to write your answer in the given worksheet. During an earthquake, most deaths and injuries are caused by collapsing building materials and heavy falling objects, such as bookcases, cabinets, and heating units. In this activity, you're going to answer the question, what will you do if tremendous earthquake occurs when you are number 1, inside the room, number 2, riding on a vehicle, and number 3, inside the mall. You're going to write your answer in your science journal. And now, to assess you of what you have learned in our lesson, you're going to answer the 15-item test. You're going to read the questions and pick the best letter for your answer in each item. You're going to write your answer in the given worksheet. I hope you enjoyed and learned something from our lesson. This is Ma'am Karin J. Gansado. See you in our next lesson.